Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we have a really interesting topic. Peyton and I were discussing it yesterday, and we're excited to talk about this topic. It's how to improve your vagal tone. And essentially, vagal tone is, we can talk about what it is, but improving your vagal tone, improving your parasympathetic nervous system can really improve your stress resilience. And why this is important is because not only will it allow you to respond better to emotional stresses in your life, but you can respond better to physical stresses in your life, including your fitness routine, and ultimately see better results from your fitness routine, feel better, respond better to stressful events in your life. So it's really cool. And it's a part of the equation that I think isn't talked about enough. So Peyton did a bunch of research on this. We chatted about it yesterday. And can you just start by telling us what does this mean? What is vagal tone?
Yes. So vagal tone is essentially the activity of your vagus nerve. So your vagus nerve is the primary driver of the parasympathetic nervous system, which we know as our rest, digest, recover system. And vagal tone is how active that nerve is, or that activity is within the nerve.
Yep, love it. And having higher vagal tone means you have a
higher parasympathetic response.
Response.
So it means with having a higher resting vagal tone, it means that you're in a more rested, relaxed state. So you're already operating from that state, as opposed to if your vagal tone is lower, you're in more of a sympathetic state and more of that resting state where you might be less emotionally resilient, more reactive to stress responses, as well as other dysfunctions.
Yes. And this can fluctuate within an individual, right? Like on an acute and chronic basis.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. And it can kind of sound, I know when I first looked into it, I was like, I've heard vagal tone, but what most people know of it now is in terms of heart rate variability. So HRV has become really accessible, really available through fitness trackers. And so a lot of people are likely thinking of vagal tone in terms of heart rate variability, which is one of our best ways to measure it at this time.
Yes.
So the same applies. Higher heart rate variability equates to higher resting vagal tone, equates to that higher parasympathetic nervous system activity.
Yes.
And to your point of it fluctuating within an individual, it really is, in HRV especially, is such an individual measurement. There's not a lot of really standards out there, especially in research, because it is very individual. So it's really about finding your baseline and then looking at the trends from there, both in the acute, like you mentioned, kind of day to day or week to week, and then as well as just overall with the goal of trying to increase that resting HRV, indicating an increased resting vagal tone.
I think it's really important to know where your baseline is so that you can adjust different lifestyle stressors if you are lower, or increase your stressors like exercise intensity.
Yes.
If you are sitting higher on that end, if you're like, okay, my vagal tone for me is high right now because I've been doing all the right things. I've been sleeping, my nutrition's good, my relationships are good, work is good. I have a higher stress resilience right now. So I can increase my exercise intensity.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you are, Peyton and I were laughing about this yesterday,
Very relevant.
Yes, this is so relevant for me because I just got back from an international trip with my 1-year-old. And so we are exhausted this week and jet lagged and getting back into work, and it's like, there's so much to do. And so I feel it, like my HRV is lower, and I could see that from my Aura ring as well. I'm just like not sleeping as well because the jet lag and things like that. So we were laughing. This is just a perfect example. I was at the doctor's office yesterday getting my blood drawn for my glucose test for pregnancy. And they were like, okay, you got to come back in an hour. And I was like, I don't have an hour. I was like, I need to get to work. I don't have time for this. Like, what? I thought I was going to be able to get in and get out. And I literally just like went into my car and broke down crying. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is not a big deal.
Hmm.
But it's because I am so like, my nervous system is so dysregulated
Yeah.
right now
Yes.
that small things were setting me off. And it was just like a point of reflection where I was like, oh, okay. Today, later in my workout, and I applied this, I was like, I'm not going to like kill it in my workout today. I'm
Yeah.
just going to do one set and fast forward to the cool down because adjusting your exercise intensity when you feel those signs can really help not tip your stress bucket over and
And lead to chronic issues.
lead to chronic issues. And so it's almost like when you're feeling those acute things pop up, grading the things that you can control because you can't always control everything else.
Absolutely.
So one of the things you obviously can control is your exercise intensity. So backing off a little bit. And the beauty of that is if you don't, and this is, I've been there too, where you're burning the candle at both ends
Hmm.
and you're continuing to exercise at high intensities or the volume that you're used to and can usually handle, I would get hurt.
Yeah.
I would exercise as hard as possible and I would get hurt. And then I would have to take 2 weeks off and then it backtracks you. So the beauty of this and understanding this about yourself is that it can help continue to move you forward, avoid injury, which
Mhm.
ultimately will help keep you consistent and allow you to see the long-term results that you're after.
That's absolutely right. And it's a very applicable way to think of it and a helpful way to think of it because I feel like things like vagal tone or your nervous system, or they can get a little bit not woo woo, but feel a little out there
Yeah.
as opposed to really narrowing it and seeing, okay, what does this mean for my life? And what does this mean for my overall health and longevity, really,
Yes.
when we break it all down. So being able to tap into things in the day to day and how you're feeling and whether you're using a tracker or not can be a really helpful tool in grading for that longevity.
Agreed. Let's talk about how vagal tone affects pain, because this
Hmm.
is something that we were researching a little bit as
Hmm.
well. And what we found is that people who have higher vagal tone have higher pain resilience.
Yes. Yep. Lower pain sensitivity and higher pain resilience.
Yeah,
Exactly.
which is so fascinating and something that we probably saw as PTs a lot too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If you think about it, and again, kind of thinking about it in practical terms, if you're in a state where you're feeling really calm, really regulated, just going about your day to day, no significant stressors are occurring, and you have like a painful event, like you stub your toe or something. Of course, the stimulus of stubbing your toe is painful in and of itself. That's the primary pain or the primary event. But then it's the reaction to that pain that really grades the level of pain that we're going to feel and experience, both psychologically and physically. And so if you have a lower resting vagal tone, you are not going to be in a place where you're going to have like kind of a more graded or a more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like a more
I don't want to say
intense.
normal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah. More or less intense.
where you have a less intense reaction to that pain. When you have a high resting vagal tone, you're in a place where your brain can kind of kick in a bit and your nervous system, you can take a beat and say, okay, that was really painful. Stubbing my toe is not fun, but I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
If you're in a state where you're already in kind of that sympathetic overdrive where you don't have your heart rate is increased, your breathing rate is increased, all these things are going, it's just adding stress on top of stress on top of stress, which will inherently increase that pain response
Right.
and that secondary pain
Right.
response.
Which is just such a cool side effect of this, of like improving your vagal tone is like when those things inevitably happen, you just have, it's just not the end of the world.
Exactly.
And it doesn't turn into chronic pain. I think that's where,
Yes.
I mean, chronic pain is obviously so complex,
Very
but
multifaceted. Yeah.
I do think that this is a leg of that.
It is.
And again, I can speak to this as having chronic pain in my past.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that this was a time in my life where, I mean, my vagal tone had to have been so low. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't have a HRV tracking at that point, but I'm sure it was super low.
Yeah.
And yeah, like chronic, like it would not, it just does not stop. And then you change lifestyle things. I changed, I started sleeping better. I started eating better. I started exercising differently, obviously, because exercise is a component of this. You can overdo it and
Mhm.
increase your sympathetic nervous system drive,
Yes.
decrease your parasympathetic drive. So I think that the pain thing was really interesting to me. And what we saw from the research is that highly active people tend to have higher vagal tone.
Yes.
So exercise clearly plays a part in your vagal tone.
Yes. There's just not really a clear understanding from a research perspective of how
Mm-hmm.
that happens. But it is clear that there is some sort of at least correlation at this point between being highly active in general, but not being too active in terms of
Yeah.
not overtraining and overreaching. So there is a lot of research to support using HRV as a way to note if you are overreaching or overtraining. And kind of speaking to what we've already talked about with grading your activity based on that. But it is shown in those populations that are otherwise healthy young individuals having that lower vagal tone or that lower HRV often is correlated with overtraining. And so we can take that and we can look at that objective data and say like, okay, is there something that I can adjust in my training routine that I do have control over, to your point? That's
Yeah.
not like just a life event that you don't have control over.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Because it also just depends on the other lifestyle things that you have. Like,
Right.
can you tolerate a lot of exercise and a lot of intense exercise if all the other things in your life are like going well? If you're sleeping perfectly and eating perfectly and all your relationships are good and all of those things that contribute to stress in your life, if all of those things are going well, maybe someone can tolerate a lot of exercise and benefit from that. But
Yeah.
most of us, you know,
Are living in
are
the
living a
21st
real,
century. Yeah.
yes, are living a real human life, and
Mhm.
exercise is not our job. And I think this, I don't want to get off too much on the rails, off the rails here, but I think a lot of times I see on social media people training, a lot of volume. So like
Yes.
really high volume.
Yeah.
So lots of sets per week per muscle group.
Mhm.
And there's lots of talk of just in like the hypertrophy world of like, you have to get at least 10 sets per muscle group per week and train your glutes 3 times a week. And, got to be in the gym for an hour every day. Like
Right.
there's just a lot of that encouragement. And we get sometimes from EVLO members, EVLO members will send me posts and be like, what do you think about this? Like, are we training enough? And it's like, here's the thing. That's a lot of stimulus and that's a lot of stress on our bodies. And if someone is on the internet posting that, okay, this is working really well for me, I would think we have to take a look at who that is. Like,
Sure.
are they a fitness influencer and that's their job? And
Yes.
that is their main stress
Yes.
is like, I have to exercise in order to like look a certain way in order to have my job.
Mhm.
I think that's important to factor in and understand is like, okay, they may be able to tolerate that because it's what they're doing for a living.
Yeah, it's their 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
It's not the extra on top of the 9 to 5 stressors plus the outside life stressors. Like maybe they do have these other outside life stressors like kids or family or pets or whatever it is, things going on, relationships. But if their 9 to 5 is content creation or just being like exercise truly is more of their job, or like someone like a bodybuilder, like that's a professional bodybuilder, that's their job. They're not having an additional layer of the 9 to 5 stress of a different type of job, plus then going and working out after that.
Yes,
or before that.
exactly. So, and it's also just, it's not to say that like lower volume, again, I don't want to go too much off the rails here, but
I think
it
this
is
an
kind of
important,
relevant.
I think it is very relevant.
Yeah. Lower volume, we recommend, or we do in EVLO, like 4 to 8-ish sets per muscle group per week. And one of the reasons why we do that is I find that it's a really good, well, first of all, based on the literature, you can see great muscle gain and strength gains from that volume. And I also think that it tends to be a volume that is really realistic for most people who have jobs and lives and things going on outside of it. Like fitness is not their life.
Yes.
It allows them to still see gains without tipping their stress bucket over and causing an increase in their resting vagal tone chronically, which or decrease
Yep.
decrease in their resting vagal tone chronically, which can ultimately affect how they're responding to exercise, how they are building muscle, how they are the
Your
fitness
endocrine system,
results,
your hormone system.
your
Yeah.
hormones, how you're feeling, how you're sleeping, and that's the whole system. So yeah, I just wanted to say that more is not better when it comes to exercise, even though we don't have like a ton of strong data on this right now. That's kind of like the theory and what I've seen anecdotally and what we've seen from so many members.
Yeah, and just to drive home the point of why it's important and why higher resting vagal tone matters in this context is that when we have that higher resting vagal tone, we have the ability to rebuild the muscle in that state. That's why it's really important. It's because if we're just adding, if we're tipping that stress bucket more and more and not allowing that resting vagal tone to rise, then we're not going to be able to build the muscle back up that we've intentionally broken down with exercise.
Yes.
So that's like just to make that part of it clear too.
Because your parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for its rest, digest, heal. So the healing portion of it is where we build muscle. So if that part is lacking because you're so stressed and your sympathetic nervous system is so high, you might not be building muscle as effectively or at all.
Right.
So yes, awesome. Let's talk about how to measure this. If you're like, okay, yes, I'm on board that this matters. Yes. How do I measure it? We talked about you can measure it via HRV if you have a fitness tracker like an Aura Ring. That's the one I use, so I don't know about the other one. You said
I think most other ones have it as well. Again, I don't use any of them, but I believe that Apple Watches, Fitbits, and a few of the other ones, a Garmin watch I know for sure has HRV. So lots of options. For that.
The goal or the idea is to raise your HRV for you. You can't really, the interesting thing about HRV is you can't really compare it. Like you can't say like, this is an ideal range. Everyone should get to 100 HRV because it's so individualized and there are no reference ranges, which is really fascinating about it. So what you have to do is just understand your baseline and kind of where you lie when you feel really good, and then chronically try to raise that over time. And I know I've done that for myself, and pregnancy, it's obviously lower. But I've done that for myself. It's like chronically raise my resting number over time through lifestyle and behavior changes. So HRV, I get a lot of questions about like, what should my HRV be? Well, you can't
just start tracking for yourself if you're interested in that, and then you'll start seeing trend. It's looking for the trends over time.
Looking for the trends and looking to increase yours over time.
Yes.
But if you don't have to have a fitness watch or a fitness tracker to track and understand and assess kind of your own vagal tone. And because there's subjective ways to measure it. Let's talk about the CO2 tolerance test. That's a really good way.
Do you want to go into explaining it? I feel like you explained CO2 tolerance test in your sleep. And then I can talk about some of the like symptoms that you might feel or like signs to look for there.
Because there are like tests that you can do on yourself. And then there's just like how you feel. Like, again, right now I'm like, oh, I just feel, I don't have to look at my Aura Ring to know that I am on the low end right now. So the CO2 tolerance test is a way to measure your parasympathetic nervous system activity. That's kind of your vagal tone right now in the moment. And again, you can use this as a tool to compare later down the line. You can use it when you're feeling low. You can use it when you're feeling good and kind of compare, okay, where are my numbers? Write it down if you want, if you're into the data. So what you do is you take 5 deep breaths in and out through your nose. So breathe as deep as possible. And then on your 6th breath, you breathe in as deep as you possibly can and breathe out through pursed lips like you're breathing out through a little straw, like letting out as little air as possible. Now, you don't want to hold your breath at any point. You want to be constantly letting out air through your mouth. And time that. Time how long from the start of your exhale to the very end of your exhale. The end gets really uncomfortable. You're like pushing out air and you're like, nah, I don't have any more. Keep going as long as you possibly can. Time that. What we see is that I think I want to say 25 seconds or less could be an indicator that your vagal tone is low. 25 seconds or more could be an indicator that your vagal tone is doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, again, this is going to be dependent on you. Maybe you, when you're feeling good, your feeling good is 20 seconds. Okay, so let's go on that and let's start to slowly increase that over time with some of the tools we're going to talk about here in a moment. So that's one thing that I use. Again, you'll find if you're not recovered from exercise that your CO2 test will be lower. So you'll have a lower number on that. You won't be able to exhale for as long. Other life stressors, again, if you're tired, if you're not well slept, things like that, your CO2 tolerance test will be lower. So that's a really good way to measure. I think another good, more objective test to use is grip strength.
Yeah, with a handheld dynamometer.
If you have a handheld dynamometer, I think I bought one just for fun on Amazon.
They're cheap on Amazon.
Yeah, it was like $30. You don't need to buy one of these. But look at your grip strength. And the reason that grip strength is an indicator of overall recovery and therefore an indicator of your vagal tone at the moment is because grip strength tends to be a good overall measure of your muscle capacity in general. So if your grip strength is low for you, and I can always feel it.
That was going to be one of my, subjective measures is just feeling it in my hands and my feet.
Yes. Or like even as simple as like, is it harder to open a jar?
Yeah.
Than usual. And you just feel like you're like, oh my gosh, like I really have no strength there. So that is another good way. And then there's some subjective tools as well to kind of look at.
Yeah. And I think too, when utilizing either CO2 tolerance test or handheld dynamometer or just regular grip strength, gripping a towel, doing it and finding your baseline when you know you're in a good space. So before, and especially if you're wanting to assess your training program and how it's affecting you, you could check it at the beginning of your week before you've had these different stressors, after you've had a recovery day, you're feeling really good. It's a really good time to get your baseline.
Yes.
So then you have that to compare it to for yourself for the future. So you're not just like kind of taking them at random times, and then you'll have a better understanding and be able to see trends better without having to have a smart device.
Yes, I love it.
There.
I love it.
And then some subjective things of just like we were saying, kind of the heaviness in the feet or hands, or feeling like you can't grip onto things as well, feeling like you're constantly sore, feeling really achy, and just overall like very fatigued, more than average.
Mental fog.
Yes,
that's
mental brain.
That's a
brain
big
fog.
one for me is mental fog.
Yes.
and feeling like flustered, frantic.
Yes.
Like this week, I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I?
And if you're feeling like heart palpitations, or feeling, of course, if you're feeling significant symptoms, go see a medical provider. But if you're feeling like increased heart rate, like you're not able to take deep breaths, those are all really good signs too, and easy signs to, I might need to check in on this.
Yes. So let's say someone wants to improve their vagal tone either acutely or chronically.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get into this, obviously we need to make sure the lifestyle things are there. So you're exercising regularly enough, but not too much. You're sleeping enough. All of those things that everybody already knows.
None of this is a Band-Aid over.
Yes. None
can't
of this
be used as a Band-Aid.
Exactly. And maybe it can, like acutely, like in a short.
It absolutely can acutely.
Yeah. Okay. We could talk about that. So let's talk about how to, and both of these tools can be used to improve your vagal tone in the moment.
Yes.
And then chronically over time. So can you tell us what they are?
So biggest thing, number one thing, and most well-researched, truly, there's so much research on it, is breath work. And it can sound really obvious, but it's not. And it's not something I think that a lot of people are putting into play. So the key for this is slow breathing. So pretty much every research article defines slow breathing as around 6 breaths per minute of time. So taking 10 seconds for each of those breaths, with both the inhale and exhale included in that. And then within that, there's different ways or different types of slow breathing and techniques that have been studied that can be helpful. So these are just easy tools to just put into your tool bag after this episode. So the first type of breathing is resonance breathing. And all that means is just equal parts in and out. So you could do 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, or longer, to keep with that slow breathing pattern. You still want it to fall in the slow breathing category. So that's the first type. And then the second type is diaphragmatic breathing. And those two can be paired together. These don't have to be mutually exclusive, but we are big fans of diaphragmatic breathing here at Evlo. And the idea of this is that your diaphragm is your main respiratory muscle kind of at the base or underneath your lungs, and your vagus nerve runs through that diaphragm muscle, through the esophageal hiatus, through that opening. So anytime you're intentionally contracting and relaxing that muscle, it's going to stimulate the vagus nerve, which helps to increase that vagal tone. So the idea with and how we describe it in Evlo is it's commonly misunderstood as belly breathing, and that's not necessarily the case, but that might be a conversation for a different episode or a different time. But with diaphragmatic breathing, you really want to focus in on your rib cage expansion. And that is because as you expand that rib cage out, and we like to think of it in 360 degrees or like an umbrella is opening, is that this allows your diaphragm to descend and contract appropriately to bring air into the lungs. And then therefore we'll have a nice, even relaxation. Yeah, exactly. Coming up. So getting really great activation and true physical activation of your vagus nerve. So that's a handy tool there.
And that's something that we do in the beginning and end of class. And so it's a way to really introduce you into, or really, an introduction into breath work, and then also a way to sprinkle it into your routine, like regularly.
So that it doesn't have to feel so daunting. I think that's what can feel daunting, both when people say, oh, you just need to do breath work and meditation. It can feel really overwhelming, or like I have to add another thing into my already busy life. But it's something that we integrate into our training program. And then you can also integrate just in your car.
Yes.
When you're driving, that is a great
I'm
place.
doing it right now.
Exactly. And then just a third technique, and I know Huberman talks about this technique a lot, is cyclic breathing and or cyclical breathing, either or. And the idea of this is that you're taking a slow inhale through your nose, and then you take another inhale on top of that to fully fill the lungs. And then the key is a slow exhale through pursed lips or through a sigh, almost like that CO2 tolerance test. So the idea is extending the exhale as much as possible and truly getting all of the air out. And this is important because the exhalation is the part of the process that upregulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So even in like my training as a PT, especially in PRI, we did a ton of 4 counts in, 6 counts out. Our out was always longer than the in for the purpose of upregulating that parasympathetic nervous system.
And this can have acute benefits.
Yes, especially the cyclic breathing is a great tool for if you're needing, it's kind of like that physiological sigh is what they call it as well. If you are just in a hyper acute moment of you've just got told you have to wait an hour at the doctor's office and you don't have time, like truly taking just a few rounds of that can shift your immediate state. And then research also, it shows that not only can it, but it is needed to do these prolonged techniques to see long-term benefits.
Yes. So it can have a effect on you immediately and then chronically. It's so funny. Like, do you do this sometimes when you're crying? Like it's double inhale. Yes. It sounds like I'm like unhinged in this.
No, it doesn't. No,
people are gonna listen and be like, is she okay? No, I really am okay.
No, not at all. But those are the tools that we have immediately available, and it's free. It's the best part of breath work is you can really do it anytime. But I am a fan of setting aside some time to do it, and that can be in your car, but it can be even more beneficial to pair it in like a calming environment or in a seated place or where you can close your eyes and take out the visual stimulation as well. So just really like those are tangible and researched tools. It's not woo-woo. It's not out there. It is very like real on a physiological level.
Yeah. Well, and I know we talked about yesterday, you feel like you have really improved your own vagal tone chronically over time. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that can be a great way too for us to kind of like wrap up our conversation around this is over the last few years, I've had some pretty intense life experiences and gone through some very hard things. And simultaneously, I've done different trainings for my meditation practice and practiced just on my own as well as integrated within Evlo. And I was definitely a reactive teenager. Not as much a child, but when I was younger, and things were just could set me off, and I had a much quicker response time, or like there was no separation in between stimulus and response. And through the years of the amount of training that I've done, like even with these big hard things that I've gone through, or news that I received, or dropping a weight on my hand the other day, I've noticed, and I've worked on also in therapy, an increase in the time between the stimulus and then my response to it. And I do believe that having that higher resting vagal tone has allowed me that space to make that happen.
Yes.
And it's been it's been life changing. Like, not to
Yes.
be dramatic, but I feel like a different person.
I see it even over the few
Yeah.
years that I've known you. And yeah, and physically too, like your
Yeah.
fitness results have been
Oh,
insane. Like
oh my gosh.
your,
Different ball game. I've
it's,
never been able to gain muscle before. So it's this snowball effect and this upward spiral that we call it.
yeah,
And it's all really connected.
it's worth paying attention to.
It is.
Well, thank you for being here. I hope this episode was inspiring to you all. And we will see you all next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.